Good evening and welcome to this fourth in a series of webinars about Herdly. This one is titled Herdly Tips and Tricks, and we're planning on spending some time just learning a bunch of fun little tips and tricks that you can use within Herdly, both on the phone and on the desktop, to make things more efficient and faster as you work with Herdly in the future. My name is Cannon Smith. I'm one of the creators of Herdly, and we'll be taking you through these tips and tricks tonight. Just want to remind you that we have 3 webinars in this series that were recorded previous to this. They're all available on our website at herdly.ca, and if you haven't seen those, you're welcome to go through those. They go through setting up Herdly, using Herdly in quite a bit of depth, and creating a ranch and all sorts of things like that. This webinar will also be recorded, and we hope to have it on our website shortly so that it's available to watch again in the future as well. Take a quick look at the agenda tonight. It's very simple, tips and tricks, and then questions. So let's get started with the demo. To begin with, let me just switch to the phone. We're going to start on the phone tonight. So let me just get switched over so you can see that. All right, there we go. You should be able to see my phone right now. I'm currently looking at a list of animals. So the first tip I want to show is how you can select one animal when you want to work with it when you're unsure of whether other animals are selected. And as an example, if you have quite a few animals, in this particular one I have 150 that are displayed at the moment. Let's say that I was working with an animal up here in the past, and I did some things with it. And then I happen to be scrolling down, and I'm quite a ways down here, and now all of a sudden I want to work with 133A. Let's say I want to record a new calf for her. So when I tap Animal at the bottom, you'll see that New Calf is not available. The reason it's not available is because I actually have 2 animals selected, and to create a new calf, I can only do that when 1 animal is selected. And so at this point, you may be thinking, well, okay, now I got to go scroll around and find that animal. But there is a faster way. And what you can do, let's unselect that one for the moment. Whenever you know you want to make sure there's only 1 animal selected, all you have to do is tap and hold. And when you tap and hold for a moment on that row, you'll see this little checkbox come up. And if you slide your finger up and touch the checkbox and let go, it'll actually make sure that any other animals that you can't see are not selected, and only this 1 animal will be selected. So then you tap Animal, and you can see now that New Calf is an available action because you only have 1 selected. Let me cancel that. I'll just show it one more time with an animal further up. I'll tap on 131F, long press for a second, slide my finger up, let go, and you'll see that the previous cow was deselected, and this one is now selected. So just a quick tip to get you to select just 1 animal as quick as possible. Now the next tip, as you are already aware, I'm sure, at the bottom of this screen, or near the bottom of this screen, you can see we have Animal, Stages, Actions, and Events. And if we select 1 or more animals in the list and then tap one of these buttons, it comes up with a menu of different kinds of actions that we can perform on those animals. And you can see there's quite a few different actions if I tap on some of the events at the bottom. Sometimes if you get in a hurry, it might be easy to forget where those actions are. And more importantly, we tend to do things over and over again. You know, maybe you've got some animals coming through the chute and you're going to give them a drug event and then do something else with them. Maybe you're weaning them at the same time. And so you want quick access to these repeated actions. And that's where the gear button in the center of this menu comes in handy. If I tap the gear button, it comes up with a menu just like the other ones. But the difference is that this menu is based on the last 5 actions that you used. And so as you remember a moment ago, I used New Calf. Now it's at the top of this menu, ready to go. And as you add different items, for example, let's go events, tap on new drug event. Now I'm just going to cancel out of that. But if I go back and tap on the gear button, you'll see that new drug event is at the top. And so if I were to tap it, again, the new drug event action comes up and we're good to go. And so keep that in mind if you're going to do the same action over and over again with animals. Once you've sort of set it up with your first cycle, you can use that gear button to quickly get through your actions, and should be a lot more efficient for you. The next thing I want to show is how to work with selections a bit more on the phone. You can see right now we have two animals that are selected, 131F and 133A. And if you look up to the, just beside, to the right of the search field, you'll see that it tells us we have 150 displayed right now, and we have 2 that are selected. Now if I tap one more, you'll see that that changed to 3 selected. Sometimes you want to work with a group of animals, and it's easier to, well, first of all, you might want to select all of the animals in the group. Maybe you've applied a filter, you're only looking at, say, your calves, and you want to select everything. Well, rather than going through and trying to tap every single animal in a list of 150 or more, you can go up and see in the top left of the screen, there's a selection button. If I tap that, it gives me a menu with several options. And the first one is select all. If I tap that, it does exactly what we'd expect. It selects all the animals that are in the list. Similarly, if I go back to selection, I can deselect all. That's the second option there, and that ensures that none of the animals there are displayed. We have 2 more, invert selection and clear selected animals. So invert selection is interesting. Let's say we had, let me select just a few animals. Let's say we want to do something with all of the animals except these 3 animals. So I select those 3 animals to start with, because that's faster than selecting all the other ones. And then I go to selection and I say invert selection. And now you can see that all of the other animals, except the 3 we first selected, are selected, and it's ready to do something with that. And then if we want to clear that selection, it does something basically the same as deselect all. We just hit clear selection and everything is gone. So that's a couple of quick tips with working with selections of animals to make things a little bit faster on the phone. All right, the next thing we want to look at is some of the pickers we use when we're editing in fields. So let me select an animal. Let's just choose calf. I'm going to edit this animal so we can get to some fields. Let's look at the birth section. And we have a bunch of information here. So the first thing I want to show is, let's say, the Calving score. If I tap that, you'll see that it expands below so we can see a list of possibilities. And all we have to do is choose whichever one we want. And another tip here is that if I tap the field itself again, you'll see that it disappears. Sometimes that's handy to be able to show that and then get it to go away so that you can go on to other fields if you want. You don't have to do that. You can make a change like this, and then you can just tap on another field, like vigor score, and then make a change there, and that's no problem. But if you're trying to clean up, knowing that you can tap again to have that collapse can certainly be handy. Let's look at dates for a minute. They're a little bit different on the phone than they are on the computer. So we have the birth date here. And if I tap that, you'll see that we can quickly change the birth date by simply sliding one of the days. We can slide the year, and I can slide the month to change it. Similarly, you'll see that just above the picker, there's, on the left-hand side, we can choose between date and time. If I tap time, the picker changes so that I can change the time. And so you can quickly change either the date or the time by going back and forth between those two. And of course, if I tap up in the top part of that, it will collapse and go back to the way it was. What do you do if you want to get rid of a date? Let me open that back up again, and you'll see that a little X button appears just beside the date itself. And if I tap that, then the birth date will actually change to none in this case. Okay, so let's say now that you want to enter in a tag number. I'm going to go back up to the identification section. And we have a tag here, 116F. Let's say we want to change it. I'm going to tap on that. And you'll see at the bottom, we have a keyboard that comes up. And this isn't the normal keyboard that comes with the phone. This one's been specially designed for entering tags of cows. Most cows have mostly numbers in their tags, and so we make that the easy part to enter really quickly. So if I wanted to enter 255, I just simply tap 255 as you would expect. But how do you enter a letter if you need to? Well, there's a couple of ways. And if you only need to enter 1 or 2 letters, sometimes the fastest way is to use this little trick. Let's say I needed to enter in a K. You'll see that underneath the 4 is the letters JKL. And if I tap and hold on the 4, suddenly this little menu comes up. And all I have to do is then tap on the K, and you'll see that we now have 255K. And I can continue to do that as I want to in order to finish out the tag if there's more than one letter. The other thing I can do is, you'll see just above the 1 is a button called Switch Keyboard. If I tap that, it actually switches to the regular phone keyboard, and then I can go ahead and use that as much as I want. And that can sometimes be easier if you're typing in a lot of text that isn't numbers. All right, let's cancel out of that, and we'll go on to entering RFID numbers. Now, where possible, it's nice if you can use an RFID reader with a phone, and we support pretty much every RFID reader that's on the market. And it's nice to do that wirelessly. If you just scan the tag, it'll automatically come into the field that you're entering in when you have that keyboard up. But we know that sometimes you have to enter in RFID tags manually. And so to do that, we've added a couple of things into Herdly to make it so that that's as easy as possible. And we do that based on the idea that RFID tags come in groups of 25 generally when you buy them in the store. And if you're just entering in random RFID tags, this probably won't help. But if you're doing them in order, as often happens, like during calving, for example, this mechanism can help. So what is it? Let me show you. There's actually 2 pieces to it. So I'm going to tap on, let's see, I'm going to tap on a cow somewhere. Let's choose this one. And we're going to pretend like we're going to give it a new calf. And if I go down to the RFID field and tap in it, you'll see that it pre-populates with an RFID number. And in this one case, it ends with 370. Now, where did it come up with this number? It came up with this number by remembering that the last RFID tag entered on this phone actually ended in 369. So it remembers that, and by default, it tries to give you the next one up. And if you are taking them from a bag and taking them off one by one, this can save some time because it'll pre-populate that tag number. Now, if that isn't the correct one, then you're going to have to start entering it in. And you can see we've got our little RFID keyboard up here. Now, the other thing we could take advantage of is the fact that the first 6 digits, at least, of an RFID tag are pretty much always going to be the same. So, for example, in Canada, it's always going to start with 124000, and then the last 9 digits are could be different. Other countries will have a different code, but it's going to be similar in the way that works. And so and then also, if you are buying them by bags, often the next 3 digits and possibly even the next 6 digits are also going to be the same. So what we've tried to do is make it so you only have to type in a few digits in most cases. And you do that by starting from the right. So let me just start typing in. Let's say that in this particular case, the tag number was 124000 125, just like it is now, but then it ended with 987654. So I'm just going to start typing in those digits, 987, and you can see as I do that, it's replacing the digits that are already there, but from the right-hand side, 654. And so if I can identify just the portion that needs to be changed, I only have to type in those digits, and now you can see that the tag is ready to go. It's a little bit tricky to think about at first, but after you've done it a time or two, it becomes very fast to enter in RFID tags by only entering in 3 or 4 or maybe 6 digits in most cases, occasionally 9, but almost never more than that. And it makes it pretty quick. Okay, let me get rid of that. The next tip I want to show is for entering in breeds. So let's go to, there it is, the breed field. Now, because I'm in the new calf screen, it's actually pre-populated the breed field based on the breed of the dam, and in this case, we haven't specified a sire, so it's saying that it's 50% unknown. That's where the question mark 50 comes in at the end of the breed. Now, if I wanted, I could enter in a breed completely manually. So if I tap the breed field, it's just going to bring up a text editor, and I could do something like, I know that Angus is AN, so I could do AN 50, and if I just left it at that, it's going to recognize that as half Angus and half unknown. And that can be done, but obviously it requires remembering the letters and entering in stuff on the keyboard, which isn't very easy. You may remember that in the ranch settings window on the desktop, there's a place where you can set up a list of common breeds for your operation. And I've done that in this sample ranch with 3 pretend common breeds. And the way to access those is to tap the plus button in the field over by the breed label. So if I tap that, you'll see that I get a list of common breeds that I've defined for this ranch. And if I tap one of those breeds, then that's the breed that gets entered in here. So much faster way to enter in breeds. If you've set that up beforehand, you can quickly do that and move forward. Okay, let's cancel this. The next thing I'd like to show, I just scroll to the top here, is how you can get an animal's history. And the way to do that is to tap the eye icon. I'm going to do this beside the 101F calf. So I tap the eye icon and it brings up this screen, which shows lots of information. At the top of this, there is the menu, basic info, stages, events, miscellaneous, and timeline. And if I tap one of those, for example, I'll tap stages and I'll tap birth. You'll see it quickly scrolls to the birth section. And if I wanted, I could tap the little, you see the circle with a minus sign in it at the top of that section, and you'll see that it collapses that section. Or I can tap the plus button to have it expand that section back out again. But notice that there's a red pin in there. Each time we choose a section from the menu, or if we manually scroll to it, let's say we scroll to health events, and if I tap the pin, it's going to make sure that that section is the top part of this history, and importantly, it remembers that for the next time. So if I go back out, and if I choose a different animal, let's look at 102F and tap the eye icon, you'll see that it remembers that you were looking at the health events and scrolls immediately to that section of the history. And that can make it a lot easier to deal with if you try and do the same thing over and over again with an animal. Makes it easier to look at the same thing quickly without having to scroll each time. Another thing I'd like to show in the animal history, I'm going to go back to 101F, which is a calf. If I scroll down, well, I'm already down there, I forgot we pinned that. If I scroll back up to the pedigree section, you can see that 101A is this calf's dam. And because it's there and in green, I can tap it, and it actually slides over to show the animal history of this particular animal, of this cow. if I were to scroll down until I get to the calves section, you'll see there's an I button beside each calf. And if I tap one, it'll actually slide over and show the calf's history. And so you can kind of burrow in and start looking at the history in any section of the history of any of your animals based on their pedigree, based on their lineage. And as you do that, you can also go back out. So at the top left of the screen, I can hit the back button to go back, hit it again to go back, hit it one last time, and then I'm back to my list of animals. So that's a few things about working with animal histories. Hopefully that will be helpful. All right, let's see what is next. Oh yes, you'll see that right now, for each animal in this list, we're looking at 4 different things. In the top left, we're looking at the management tag. Top right, we're looking at the location. The bottom right, we're looking at the classification. And the left-hand side, we're looking at the breeding stage. Now, maybe you want to look at something different. How do you do that? Well, I'm going to tap on the settings button at the very bottom in the tab bar. And one of my options there, the third one down, is Animals List Preferences. If I tap on that, you'll see that at the top we get a little rendition of what that cell looks like with the tag, breeding pool stage, current location, classification. And I can change what's shown in any one of those corners. So let's say I didn't really care about breeding pool stage. So I'm going to tap it, and you'll see that it turns red. So I know that's the one I'm changing. And then I can go through and I can find some other piece of information. So maybe I want the date of the last calf. So I'm going to tap that, and now we show date of last calf. And I could continue and change these other ones if I wanted. Now, if I go back to the animal list at this point, you'll see that now in the bottom left of each of the cows, it's showing the date of the last calf. And for the calves, of course, it's not showing anything because they haven't had a calf yet. So that's a little tip for how you can show a different kind of information when you want to on the phone in the animal list. Okay, what do we have next? Let's see, we did the animal history, changing fields, and the pedigree. Okay, the next thing I'd like to show is in the dashboard. So I'm going to tap on the dashboards button in the bottom left in the tab bar. And this shows our dashboard. And this is pretty nice. You know, you can see your graphs. You can scroll vertically, look through all of the dashboards that you have currently. Just as a reminder, these update live. So every time you make a change, these automatically recalculate within a few seconds. And we're just showing the ones we have. We can customize and show others. But let's say we wanted to get a little bit more detail. So we're looking at average birth weight here. And we can kind of see the trend over the last 4 years of what's been recorded. You can see it's kind of dropped a bit this year. But what if we want to see the actual numbers? Well, the way to do that is to actually tap on that graph. So I'm going to tap on average birth weight. And then I have to turn my phone sideways. And I can see that exactly what the birth weight was each one of those years. And I can see that currently I'm at 68.3 pounds. So that's pretty light. So I think I only have 3 or 4 calves in right now, and they're all pretty light calves. Once I'm in this mode, though, I can swipe left and right. So here I'm swiping left, and I can go to each graph, and again, seeing each one right there on the screen with all of the numbers involved. The other thing I can do is you'll see there's a little grid button in the top left-hand corner. If I tap that grid button, it's going to show me all of the dashboards that I have currently selected to be shown in this list. And sometimes it's good enough just to kind of look at the graph. You can see all the ones you want right from here. Or if I want to go in and look at a particular one, then I can tap it. So for example, maybe I want to look at the calves weaned by percent. And looks like I have some okay data the first 2 years, and obviously I haven't put in much data in this ranch, this example ranch, for the last 2 years shown in the graph, but you can see how that works. And when I'm done with this, I want to go back to the regular way of looking at the dashboards. I tap the Done button in the top right, which pushes me back to the regular up and down view, and we're back to where we were. Okay, just two more things that I'd like to show on the phone. The first one, I'm going to go to Animals, and I'm going to select a history like we had before. And I showed before how when you're done with looking at a history or something that's come in from the right, I can tap the back button at the top left and you go back to where you were. There's a little trick, if you like, where you can actually swipe. You won't be able to see me do this, but I can swipe with my finger from the left-hand side of the screen. And I have to actually start from off the screen and then swipe from the left to the right-hand side. And that does the same thing as tapping the back button. And if you have a taller phone and it's hard to reach that back button, a lot of times it's easier to just swipe from the left to get that. So there's another little trick. And then the final trick on the phone is sometimes you want to force a sync. Now, I've shown in another webinar a bit about how sync works behind the scenes. If you watch that, you'll know that each time you make a change on the phone or on the, it works the same on the desktop, within a few seconds, usually 10 seconds at the most, it sends that data up to the cloud so that it can be sent down to other devices. And it's good about getting that data to the cloud as quickly as possible so that you don't have to worry about losing that data. That's assuming, of course, that you have a cellular or Wi-Fi connection at that moment. If you don't, it's not a problem. It just keeps trying. Once you have a connection again, it will try and send all that stuff up, and you don't have to worry about it. On the other hand, if you're not making any changes on the phone, but you know somebody else is making a change, we don't spend a lot of your network resources by checking with the server every few seconds. That would be wasteful to do that and eat up your battery life and even the amount of data that you use on your phone. So instead, we only do that once in a while, once every 30 to 60 minutes, or even it can be different depending on the situation. We try and do it somewhat intelligently to save on those resources. But there may be a time when you know that you need to force a sync because someone else made a change and you want to see that right away. So the tip is to tap the settings button in the bottom right-hand corner. Now we were in the main view settings here, and so I'm going to go back out to the main, we were in the animal list preferences settings, so I'm going to go back out to our main settings list here. And you'll see that one of the options, the very first one in fact, is sync. If I tap on that, first of all, it gives us a bit of information. It lets us know when the last successful sync was. And in fact, if there were some errors in syncing, it would show a list of those errors here so you get a better idea what's going on. But for our purposes, the important part of this screen is the button there in the center, Perform Sync Now. And if I just tap that, it just immediately forces a sync, and then I know that everything's up to date. And if I go back to the animals list, anything that was changed will now show up here. Okay, I think that's the last one. Let me double check. Yes, that was the last one on the phone. So let me switch back to the computer, and then we'll go ahead and show some tips and tricks on the computer. So switch. Okay, hopefully you're now able to see the computer. You can see that I have hurriedly launched here, and we're just currently looking at the dashboards. Since we were just talking about sync, I'll show you how you can force a sync on the computer. The process is exactly the same. When you make a change, it tries to get it off the computer as quickly as possible, but it only checks with the server, if you haven't made a change every 30 or so minutes. And if you need to force a change, you can do that in a couple of different ways. You can go up to the File menu and choose Sync, and that's going to go ahead and force a sync. Optionally, if you just want to do it with the keyboard, you can, if you're on a Windows computer, you would hit Control-S, and if you're on a Macintosh, you would hit Command-S. So I'll just do that now, and you'll see that that forces a sync. And it doesn't matter what window you're in, that's going to force a sync. I like that particular shortcut for myself because I've gotten in the habit of when I'm writing something in a document to hit Control or Command S to save something quite often. And it's the same thing here. We're kind of saving or getting things back in sync. So it's an easy shortcut, I think, to remember. Okay, here's another tip. If you if you click the Animals button, or you go to Animals and choose Animal List, either way, you're going to open up the animal list, and then here you can work with all of your animals. Sometimes, though, you might wish that you could be working with a group of animals doing something with them, and then at the same time be working with a different group of animals. Maybe you're doing some kind of comparison or something, and it would be nice to have two of these windows open. And in fact, that's quite possible. If we go back up to the animals menu, if I just choose Animals List, all it's going to do is make sure that this Animals List is the frontmost window. However, if I go here and if I hold the Shift key down while I choose Animal List, you're going to see that we get a second window. And this window is completely independent. You know, if I started typing, I'm only looking at a few. Over here, I can do something different. We could be printing different things or showing different columns, using different actions. It really doesn't matter. They're completely independent. And in fact, I could do that again. I'll hold the Shift key down again while I choose Animal List, and I get a third window. And there are actually no limits to how many windows you can open by doing that. All right, let me close a couple of these windows. We'll get back to just one. I showed before on the phone, well, first of all, let me just double click an animal. Actually, let me select an animal and I'll choose Actions and show Animal History. And that shows the history. The same thing that worked on the phone will work on the desktop. So if I choose a menu and I choose, say, Mating Events, now it's going to show our list of mating events. You'll see that, again, I can collapse, I can expand. I've got the little red pin icon that's in red right now. And because that's in red, if I were to select another animal over here, it automatically scrolls after it's built the history to the pin section. And so, again, that can make things really quick to go through and look at your information about your animals. Now, if I select this calf and go to the pedigree, same thing here. If I click on her, it actually opens up a different window so that you can actually see both side by side. And then I can kind of take a look and see what's going on with this pedigree. I can resize it, so if it's a little bit small for you to see, that can sometimes be an easier way to make it larger. You can kind of go through there. And if I had more pedigree, I could continue to click and it would just barrow in just like on the phone so that I could see each animal, and then I could use this back button to go back out. Okay, let's close that. And I'm going to close the animal history. I just want to show that there is a shortcut for the animal history. If I just double click an animal like this, it automatically opens up the animal history. So that makes that a little bit quicker. All right, just going to close that child window. And I've showed this on a previous webinar, but we find people have questions on this quite often. So if you're familiar with computers, you may already know this, but I'll show it quickly anyway. When you're working with a group of animals, it's helpful to know how to select more than one animal. So here's a few tips. Most people know that if you just click on any one of these animals, then that animal becomes the selected animal. If you want to select a group of animals, the idea would be select the first one in the group, and then go down to the last one in the group and hold the Shift key down while you click it. And if you do that, all of the animals in between are also automatically selected. We call that a contiguous selection because it's all connected to each other. Sometimes you want to have what we call a non-contiguous selection, And to do that, you use the Control key on Windows or the Command key on a Mac as you select other rows. So let's say we wanted this selection as we already have it, but I also want to add in this animal. So I'm going to hold the Control or Command key down while I click, and it just adds it to the selection. And I can do that again for this animal. I can use exactly the same technique to deselect just one animal. So let's say we actually don't want this one selected. I'll hold the Control or Command key down while I click, and it deselects that one. And so by using a combination of those techniques, you can build up a selection fairly quickly to work with just the animals you want. One other tip that goes along with this is if I select just one animal, and then if I hit Control A for all, or on a Windows or Command A on Mac, you'll see that all of the animals are selected. And from there, I can hit the Control or Command key to deselect a few, and then just work with the selected ones. So that's a bit of a tip on how to work with selections. All right. Sometimes you want to work with just certain kinds of animals, or you want to have this list sorted in a certain way. And there's a few ways to do that. I've showed in a previous webinar how to use the filter to do some complex sorting, but usually you just want to sort based on a column. And so you can see right now, you see this little caret symbol here showing that we're sorting currently by the tag column. Let's say we actually wanted to sort by location. I'll just click the header, current location. And now you can see that we're sorted with bullpen first, then East Pasture, and on from there. I could click on birth date to select by the to sort by the birth date. If I click that header again after it's already been clicked once, it will do a reverse sort on the same one. So sometimes that's just a quick way to find exactly what you're after. Just as a simple example, let's say that we wanted to select all of the females. There's a couple ways we could do it. We could use a filter, as I've shown before, and that's probably the fastest way. But you could also click on gender to sort by female, select the first one, and then just scroll down to where it changes, and then hold the Shift key down while you select the last one. And now all the females are selected, and we're ready to work with just those. So sorting can sometimes help prepare something for a report, or just to help you look at the data in a little clearer way. You can also resize columns. You see that if I put my cursor in between two headers, the icon changes to this little thing, and if I click and hold the mouse while I drag, I can change the size of the column, and the headers will automatically do their best to fit in the space that you give them. And so if you have, maybe you have really long location names, if you want to change that, you can. And keep in mind, from previous webinars, I showed how to save a workspace, and the size of your columns is remembered in that workspace. And so if you adjust this, save it as a workspace, from then on it will be the size that you would like. Okay, another thing you can do with columns is you can rearrange them. Maybe I want the birth date column over here. If I just grab that header with the mouse, click and hold as I move around, I can put it where I want, just drop it in place, and there it is. Again, if I was to save that as a workspace, it would remember the location of the column as well. And that helps prepare you for if you wanted to print or export, as well as, again, just being able to look at your data visually the way you'd like to. Okay, the next tip, I think this is one that a lot of people will know, but we'll show it anyway. I'm going to choose new attributes here. And it's starting off with the date and the time here, and I could enter in quite a bit of information. One way to get around in the fields is to use my mouse, and I can click and I could type in, the weight here, and I could type in the hip height, and I could go from there. But in fact, a faster way is to use the Tab key on your keyboard. So if I'm in this field, if I hit Tab and hit Tab again, it's just going to keep going through all of these different fields. And when I get to the one I want, I can just type and keep hitting Tab. So it's a bit of a shortcut. It's faster if you're entering in a lot of data. If I want to go back to the previous field, I just hold the Shift key down while I hit Tab. So Shift Tab just goes backwards. And one thing that's nice about that, as opposed to clicking, you'll notice if I wanted to change the 1200, if I click in the field, actually it works for the number fields. But if I were to change the date, if I were to click in that field now, it actually just goes in between some of the characters. Whereas if I Shift Tabbed into it, the whole thing is selected. So as soon as I just type in one thing, it disappears, and I don't have to go through and hit the backspace to delete all the numbers and then start again. It's just ready to go. If I tab out of there, it assumes that it's June 6th, which is exactly what we'd want it to do. Okay, let's look at, well, actually, we were just looking at dates, so let's talk about that just for a bit more. When you're entering in a date, there's quite a bit of hidden features inside the date field to make things faster to enter. So let me give you a few examples. First of all, most of the time, it's going to default to like today's date or whatever makes sense. So a lot of times you don't even have to enter in a date when you're going through these actions. But if you do, there's several tips. So for example, right now we're looking at June 6, 2019. If I just want to go forward a day, I can just tap the plus button as long as my cursor is in that field. So I just tap plus and you see it goes to June 7th. Do it again, June 8th, June 9th. And I can do the minus button to go backwards. So minus, 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 minus. Sometimes if you're trying to get to a date that's just within 2 or 3 days of where you're at, that's a really fast way of doing it. You don't have to actually type any numbers in. Another shortcut in a similar fashion is going forward by a week, like to the next, the start of the week or the previous beginning of the week, and we do that using the W key. So again, as long as my cursor's in there, if I tap W, it's going to go forward to the end of the week, forward to the end of the next week as I continue to tap. And if I hold the Shift key down while I hit the W, it goes back a week. So W for week. And that can also be a quick way to move around. As you might guess, if we use the M key, M for month, it's going to do the same thing. So I'm going to hit M, it'll go to the end of the month, hit M again, goes to the end of the next month. And of course, Shift M goes to the beginning of the month. So if I hit that a few times, you can see it going backwards. It works the same for a year. So if I hit Y, it's going to go to the end of the year. Y again, the end of the next year. Shift Y goes back to the beginning of each year as we go backwards. So some quick shortcuts. Sometimes using the shortcuts are faster than trying to enter in an exact date. There are a few more things the date field will do. A lot of times you're entering in a date that's part of this month. So we're in June right now, and let's say I wanted to enter June 3rd. Well, because it's already in June, all I actually have to do is enter in a 3. So if I enter 3 and then tab out of that field, it's going to assume the current month and the current year, and so it gives us June 3rd, 2019, which is exactly what we wanted. Maybe you want something from last month, so that won't work. So last month, May was 5. Let's say we wanted May 15th. So if I just go 5 space 15 and tab out, it's going to assume the current year and and go with May 15th as I entered it in. So that can be a bit of a shortcut as well. Just 2 more things on dates, and then I'll show the documentation on that because there's a lot there. It doesn't really matter what you use in between the numbers. So I used 5 space 15 to get May 15th. I could have used something else. So for example, I could go 5 period 15. It still works. I could even do something crazy like 5Q 15. It really doesn't matter as long as it's not a number, and Hurley's able to figure that out. The last thing I want to point out on the dates is that I have my system set up in the operating system settings to show month, then day, and then year. And that's why we're seeing it in this format here. On your computer, you may have yours set up differently. Maybe you have the day first, and then the month, and then the year. And in that case, you would actually have to, if you're doing two numbers, like the month and the day, you'd have to enter in the day first, like a space or period or whatever, and then the month, so that Herdley could interpret that right. So it's all based on your operating system settings. Let me just grab our website here. You can see the website. If I click on support, and in general, I go to data entry techniques. I'm going to scroll down here a ways, skip past the mobile area, and get down to the computer techniques section. Date fields. And here you can see that all of the stuff I just showed is documented. So if you forget it until you've kind of built up a habit, you can always refer to this and it'll explain how to do it, as well as a lot of these other tips that I'm showing you here. Okay, let me check and see what's next on the list. Oh, okay, entering in a combo box. Let's see, where would be a good example of that? Let me cancel out of this. And I'm going to choose, let's just choose new calf. Now, it's automatically looking at our tag number. If I hit tab, I'm going to be in the tag color field. Now, this is a combo box, and there's several things that I can do. If I already know the color that I want to enter, I can just start typing it. So let's say it was red. I'm just going to type in R, and it knows that red is the only color that starts with R, so it's ready to go. At this point, I could just hit tab and go on. I don't even have to type in the whole color. I could go back and we could do black. Maybe I want blue, and it's thinking I want black at first, so I have to type BLU, and then it knows that I'm blue and I can tab out. So that's one way of doing it. Another way, if I'm not sure what is offered in the combo box and I just want to type it, I can actually hit my down arrow and it's going to show all of those in the list, all my options. And I can do two things at this point. I can go ahead and start typing. So if I wanted green, there I have green. Or I can also use the up and down arrows, and when I have the one I want, then I can just hit tab and it's selected. And finally, the last thing you can do with these is you can actually use your mouse and just click on the button to the right, and you can scroll around and find the color you want. And when you click it, it'll be selected and you can tab out. So if you're a mouse kind of person, there's lots of options there for you. But if you're a keyboard kind of person, you can actually enter a lot of data in quite quickly by using some of these techniques. These are all standard operating techniques, so if you learn how to use these in Herdley, they work in other programs generally as well, and they're just to help you get things done a lot quicker. Okay, what is next? Let me cancel this. Oh yes. In a previous webinar, I've shown how you can rearrange your columns and add new columns to the list by using the View button. So let's open up that window. And I didn't really go into detail, though, on how you can actually get your columns moved back and forth. So there's several ways to do that. One is I can just grab the field I want and drag it over to wherever I want and release, and there we go, I've got it where I want. Another one is I could select the one I want. I could even select several of these, and I can click the arrow that tells them to go to the right, and they'll be added at the end. I can also have them go backwards by selecting some and clicking this button, then they go back to here. I can also just double click and it will be added to the right here. But one thing that's maybe a bit tricky to know, let's say you had several columns selected and you wanted to drag and drop. To do that, you have to hold down the Alt key on the Windows computer or the Option key on your Macintosh. If I do that, then I'm able to drag and drop them exactly where I want to. So just a little tip on how to move those kinds of things around. Okay, let me cancel out of that. Now, you may know from previous webinars that I can choose all kinds of workspaces here. For example, we could choose the peg check results space, and that's going to show a bunch of, show the fields that we're interested in for preg checking, show a list of all the preg checks that have happened for each cow in the past down here, and that's all great. And as you're working with workspaces, sometimes you want to just get back to the default one, and then there's a couple ways to do that. You could click on Workspace, and then you could click on Load Default Workspace. So that's not too bad. You could also go on here and actually choose the workspace in here, double click it or click done. I'll just double click it and it would bring up the workspace. But I want to show you the fastest way to do that. So I'm going to bring up the preg check results one. Say you're done working with this and you want to get back quickly to the default workspace. The way to do that is to hold down the Alt key if you're on Windows, or the Option key on a Mac while you click Workspace, and it just immediately goes to the default workspace. So that can be pretty handy to quickly get back. Now you also may have noticed, let me just choose some, I'll choose calves weaned as a workspace. Let's say I'm using this, I might have even changed a few columns around, and I may have sorted, I may have done a few different things like that. If I close that window, and I can, do whatever I want, I can quit. But when I come back the next time I open that window, it's going to be exactly as I had it at that time. It tries to remember what you were doing last when you open that window. And so that's a good little tip to keep in mind. And it also helps in conjunction with this Alt or Option clicking workspace, because maybe this is what you're doing last time you open the window, but you definitely want to get back to the default one. Well, it's just a quick click to get back there. Okay, let's say that we're doing some stuff in this window and I want to quickly find an animal. A keyboard shortcut for that is to hit Control F on Windows or Command F on Mac, and it immediately puts the cursor up in the search field so that I'm ready to start typing in a tag number and immediately get just the tags I'm interested in. So that's Control F on Windows or Command F, F for find on those windows. Sometimes you want to use the filter window, and again, if you're kind of using keyboard related stuff, of course you can click the filter, but if you want to do it on the keyboard, you would hit Control Shift F. So just like getting to the search field, which would be Control or Command F, this would be Control Shift F or Control or Command Shift F, depending on if you're on Windows or Mac. So I'll just do that. You can see it automatically opens up the filter window so that I can make whatever changes I need to. And I can hit Escape to leave that. Similarly for View, if you want a quick action, it's the same thing but with a V instead of an F. So Control Shift V or Command Shift V for Windows or Mac, and it brings that up ready to go. Escape gets rid of it as well. Okay, I showed before, if you wanted to see an animal's history, you just have to double click the animal and the history will come up. And if you've watched the other webinars or used Herdly, you know that when you've selected some animals, you can click the Actions button in order to get a list of actions. A little shortcut here is once you've selected your animals, if you just right-click somewhere, it brings up that exact same menu. And that can be a little bit faster than, especially if you're doing the same thing over and over again. It can be faster to right-click and choose your action rather than going up to the Actions button and selecting that. So keep that in mind. Now, here's one that's kind of interesting. Sometimes you're going to be doing the same action over and over again for several animals. Let's just, as an example, we're going to choose, I'm going to right-click and I'm going to choose Move Animals. And we're going to put this one in the West Pasture. So I'll save that. I can dismiss that. Now, I want to do the same thing to another animal. What I can do, because that was the last action that was performed, if I hold down the Alt key on Windows or the Option key on a Mac, And if I double click it, so remember, double click by itself opens up the animal history window. But if I option or alt double click, instead, it remembers the last action and pulls it up again, ready to go for the next animal. So that can be pretty handy as well. Okay, I think there's just a couple more things that we'll go over, and then we should be done tonight. If I double click to bring up an animal's history, let's see, this I gave a poor example here. Let me choose this first cow. And I want to go down and I want to look at her calves. So I'm going to go down and choose Calving Events. Here's our calves. You'll notice that we have this I button to the left of each calf. And if I click on that, it'll bring up the history. So just like on the phone, not only can you get to the dam and the sire by clicking in the pedigree area, the history of those animals, you can also go the other way and look at their calves and bring up the history as well. Okay, let me close this. Now, the last thing I want to show, let's see, hopefully this is a good calf to show it on. Well, let's pretend we're going to give this cow another calf for this year. So I've selected this cow, and I'm going to choose new calf. And it knows it's going to be a twin because I already entered in a calf for this cow this year, but that's okay. You'll notice that we don't have a sire here. So I'm going to go ahead and click the ellipsis button, which brings up a list of sires. Now I can enter in any sire that I want, but I just wanted to point out here that Herdley is going through all of the existing data for this cow from the previous breeding season and seeing what bulls that she had any potential to be in, and based on the data of this calf, it's going to come up with one or more bulls that it thinks are the possible bulls. Now, if you're in a situation where, you know, maybe you're AIing or something, it'll actually show the mating events, and it's going to show those at the top as being the most likely one. And if you know for sure who it is, all you have to do is check that one bull, and then you hit OK like this, and we know who that bull is. More likely, if you're in a commercial herd, you'll only know it's within a group of certain bulls. If I just go back in there, I can actually select them all, or I could select certain ones. That little trick I used, by the way, was holding the Alt key down or the Option key on a Mac as I clicked, and it selects all of the ones in there. And if I did that, I'm choosing all 4 bulls because I think, well, that's the best information I have. It had to be one of those 4 bulls. If I click OK, it lets us know, okay, it remembers there was 4 different sires involved, and I know it was one of those 4. If I go back in there, if I wanted to, say I knew for some reason that it was a bull that isn't listed here, I can still click the plus button, and then I have access to all of the bulls. And if I just tap one, it's going to go ahead and add it to that list. And maybe I don't want these, maybe I know it's this bull, I can select just the one, or I can still keep these selected. The other thing I want to show about this window is at the bottom here, based on the birth date of the calf, it's actually backwards calculating, letting you know that based on 283 days when the possible conception date was. And it's just explaining that this list right here is listing any bull that was exposed to that cow. I should say any cow was exposed to those bulls. Anyway, within a window of 14 days on either side of this June 5th. And that's where that comes up with. So if I click OK, now it's going to give us the 2 sires that we have selected there. Okay, of course, there's lots of things that Herdley does. I just wanted to stick with things that I thought were kind of tips or tricks or things that are not easily discovered. In fact, all of that is in the documentation, as I showed on the website. I'll just bring that back up. All of the things that I showed tonight are listed in there, and you should be able to find them if you search around through like data entry techniques or some of the other places. Hopefully you can become familiar with that. All right. Well, I want to thank you for watching this webinar. I hope that it's been helpful. This is the last, as I mentioned before, in this series of webinars. We would like to hold other webinars in the future if people find them helpful. And so feel free to reach out to us and let us know what kinds of things you'd like discussed, and we'd be happy to go ahead and do that. Again, thank you for your time. We appreciate your use of Herdly, and wish you well.